Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome back. We are back with the second installment in this Build in Public series that we're doing with my good friend, often co-host, Raj Lula, and his debut novel, The Caring House. If you didn't listen to the last episode, we talked about his career story, how he thinks of himself as a writer, and what brought him to this point. Today, we're digging into what happens after you do the hard work of writing a book, and then you have to do the even harder or just as hard work of getting people to care and to read it and silently judge you for it and all of the other things. So we're digging into publishing versus self-publishing. We're digging into marketing. We're digging into just the courage, the emotional labor to make something that matters to you and then put it in front of people where they then can have opinions about it. It's such rich material. This is relevant to anyone who is making something that matters, whether that's a business, whether that's an idea, whether that's an art project, a book, whatever it might be. There's so many takeaways regardless of your medium of choice. So I'm excited to share this interview with you. Stay with us till the end. I'll be talking a little bit about a challenge and an offer that Raj and I have put together for the Meaning Movement, just related to his books, how you can be involved in what he's doing. I hope you find this inspiring. You can find links to Raj and his work and everything we talk about in the show notes at themeaningmovement.com. Jump on the newsletter while you're there. Let's get into it. This, of course, is The Meaning Movement, a show for creatives, makers, entrepreneurs to help you get the clarity and motivation that you need to overcome whatever obstacles are in your way to get your work out into the world. I'm your host, Dan Cumberland, today, once again, with my good friend, Raj Lula. Stay with us. So, Raj, you wrote a book.
Yep.
And now we got to figure out what to do with it.
Yeah. It turns out that writing the book was the easy part, and that wasn't easy. So I'm not sure I knew what I was getting myself into.
That is so true of like everything in life. It's like, I don't know. I think of the way that my wife talks about having a baby, and like the labor is the hard part, but then you have a baby that you have to, I think of building software, and like everybody thinks that like building it is the hard and the expensive part, but actually just getting people to use it
Yeah.
and then continue to upkeep it and develop it is actually the hard part. It's like
getting people to care at all.
Yes. Yeah. So yeah, I mean, writing a book is no small undertaking. Yeah, I mean, I guess before we want to talk about marketing, but I also want to talk about like, you didn't just like, sit down one week and be like, hey, wouldn't it be fun to become a fiction writer? Like this has more roots in you than that. And I think I don't know. I know we talked about this a couple episodes ago, but just for folks that haven't heard that part of your story, maybe just give us a sentence or two about like, so are you a writer, Raj?
Yeah. I mean, my day job is I'm a brand strategist, and that involves a lot of rearranging words. I saw a Twitter prompt one time that said explain your job badly, and I wrote I rearranged the 26 letters of the alphabet to make people cry. Was the joke that I used there. But yeah, I mean, I most of my job is writing, which is weird that my hobby would also be that as well. But yeah, so I do that for a living. In terms of fiction, I had not written any fiction since high school, and I imagine I'm too scared to actually look back, but I imagine it was very bad at that point, and I hope it's not still very bad, but we will find out.
Yes.
You've
Which
read
is
it,
to
so
say that
you've
like
read part of it at least, so
yes,
if it's still
and it's
very bad.
great. Which is to say that words are your profession, your tool of choice in your profession, and that writing as a endeavor, as an art, is something you've studied for a long time, put a lot of time and effort into honing that craft. So this may be your first fiction work, but it's not your first work in fiction.
Oh, yeah. Well, it's not my first work in writing for sure. I mean, millions of people literally have read my words or heard my words and don't know it, and that's kind of the nature of working in marketing. Is it's been out there, and
Yes.
this was the one thing that I have written exclusively because it was a passion project.
Yeah, I love it. So how long ago did you start writing this book?
Yeah, started about 7 years ago, and it was after hearing an episode of This American Life about a grief counseling center for children in Salt Lake City, where my wife and I had lived for a year, and I kinda got this big what if question about, what if a little boy and a little girl had both met at this grief counseling center and or at a grief counseling center and grew up, fell in love, got married, and could their marriage sustain the suspicion that they would cause each other grief in their lives by that they would be lost to each other and it was just such an interesting question, such an interesting way for me to process the experience of getting married, having children, losing jobs, losing pregnancies, all those things, losing friends, and then it just kind of started flowing out of me.
Mm. And how long did it take you to complete the book?
Yeah, so I think one thing that people don't really know is about writing a book is that you're not sure when you're done. In fact,
Yes,
I'm I'm still not 100% sure, but no, I
that
mean,
sounds right.
I'm quite a bit more sure now than I was at the beginning, but I think every author, even Aaron Sorkin, who's one of my favorite writers, wrote The West Wing. He talks about how he would take back everything he's ever written and fix it. And
Yeah,
so yeah, done is a very weird question, but I thought that I was done about 2 years in. I had written
yeah.
about 50,000 words, and that was, kind of weekend warrior stuff. It was coffee shops and late nights. I wrote a whole bunch on my 10th anniversary weekend because my wife is very patient. And no, thankfully, we're both kind of bookish, and so she wanted to read, I wanted to write, and so it's like, let's just be near each other and do those things, and it
Mm.
was actually, romance for nerds, so it was great. And so about 2 years in, I thought I was done. I didn't know what to do from there, and I was listening to the Story Grid podcast, which is great for anybody who is writing fiction, and and I realized through that and through my professional certification with Story Brand that I needed a guide. I needed somebody to help me get to the finish line with the
Mm.
book. So I hired a developmental editor in 2020 because I mean honestly, like this whole process of is like I started right after my third kid was born. He wasn't even one yet. And and then in 2020 I was like, I really should finish this thing because nothing else is going on right now. And so, but
Ugh.
no, I hired Sheila, my developmental editor, who was amazing, and she helped me. What really she did was she asked all the questions that a reader would ask from a first, second draft of a book, and go, "Hey, what happened to that character?
Mm.
What's the end of their story, or why is this person here? What are they doing?" And
Yeah.
she just poked at all those questions, and the strange experience of writing a book or writing a fiction book is that the characters just live in your head. I mean, I literally felt like I had an apartment full of people living in my head while I was writing this book, and so whenever she would ask a question, I knew the answer almost immediately. In fact,
Mm.
one of the interesting things about working with an editor is that they'll suggest things, and you'll know instinctively whether or not their suggestion is right or wrong, and
That's wild.
and so it's like, "No, Gabe wouldn't do that. No, Jenny
Mm.
wouldn't do that." Or, "Yes,
Mm.
that's absolutely yeah, well, of course that happened because this thing happened when they were young."
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it's so bizarre. In fact, I read that people who write fiction have greater levels of empathy because they essentially walk in other people's shoes.
Yeah.
And and so an unexpected benefit of it, was just learning to be more empathetic, but I was just
Yeah.
really trying to consider the story from every perspective.
Yeah. And the same is true of people who read fiction. That's one of
Yeah.
the benefits of
Yes. Which is why you
of
should
being a
buy
reader.
an
Yeah.
upcoming fiction book. I really think that it's going to
Good.
increase your level of empathy in the world.
Good reason. Stay tuned. I mean, I'm picturing this process, right? Like I just yesterday morning found this old doc of a book proposal that I'd written for myself in 2018. And like I know that it wasn't even the first draft, but like I've written some shorter ebooks and things. But like I've been flirting with this idea for forever. But usually yeah, well, I obviously have not given considerable effort to it, mostly because I'm scared of it not being very good. You got past that, and then you have to like decide to call it done. So again, you have to say, well, this is good enough. And then you have to sell it and get people to read it and say, not only is it, good enough for you to write it, good enough for you to call it done, but then also good enough for someone else to buy. And that sounds hard.
It is. Thankfully, Donald Miller taught a group of us how he did a course about how to write. I think it was Donald Miller Teaches Writing or something like that. I think it was in 2020 as well, or maybe early 21. And one of the things he said in there that was really helpful was that writing is a team sport. And
Mm.
so if we were waiting for me to think this is good enough, I would work on it probably until my last day on earth.
Yeah.
And I would just chip away at every word, every comma, everything, and I would not know what good enough actually even means. In fact, it
Yeah.
probably would actually get worse at some point. There would be diminishing returns on, the
Sounds
language would
right.
become too flowery or
Mhm.
too obtuse or whatever. And so instead hiring an editor was huge. And
Yeah.
so, one of the things that she told me even just as we started was she goes, "This is better than any first draft I've ever gotten." No offense to any of her other clients at all, but I won. No, but and I said, "Oh well, because it's not the first draft. I mean, at least not in the way
Mhm.
that you would think of it. This is the first
Yeah.
draft that I'm willing to let other humans see."
Yeah. Yeah.
and
Yeah.
and so because I'd already been through it several times, I used to
Mhm.
take my iPad to church and not listen and edit my my book while I was while I was sitting in the chairs. I don't do that anymore, but just it did happen. And so I had revised it quite a bit on my own. I'd gotten literally as far as I could on my own before hiring
Mhm.
people to help me.
Mhm.
And then there were very, very wonderful guinea pigs in my life, including my wife Lindsay and her wonderful cousin Amanda and her husband Ryan, who were the first ones to see the book after Sheila had helped me get to a point where it was ready to be seen by humans outside of a
Mm.
professional and my wife. So it's a team
Yeah.
sport. That's how
Yeah.
you get to the good enough.
Yes. Yes. um, well, it's a lot to overcome, and I applaud your courage in getting this far and in wanting to continue into the next phase, which is like we've already said,
All
actually the hard
completely
part.
white knuckled, I will say. Like it just I am absolutely faking confidence in this. Part of it is I think it's the book Steal Like an Artist that I have not read, but it's the author of that book who I think is the one who talked about how like you're gonna suck at the beginning.
Yeah.
Like you just have to go through that part of it because your tastes outstrip your ability when you start.
Mhm. Yep.
And
Yep.
thankfully, being a creative professional, I already had experienced that with photography. I'd already experienced that
Mm.
with music. And so for writing, it wasn't something that I actually didn't expect to be as I didn't expect it to be as smooth as it was when I started because that scene in You've Got Mail where her pretentious boyfriend is writing that op-ed about or no about just like trying to encourage her. He's like, I am a lone read, and he's just like channeling it, and he's whatever, and just banging away on the typewriter. That's what I felt like at the beginning. It was just like it was just like coming through me. It felt super easy to write the beginning in part because I was just trying to uncover the story. It felt like I
Mhm.
knew the main conflict. I knew what had happened. I also knew how it was going to end from the very beginning. I knew how it was going to end. And so for me, it was just like, what happened in between there? And so it was as interesting for me as it hopefully will be for the reader.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, just this is a aside, but I just love that you reference You've Got Mail as if it's like, common cultural canon, which I mean, it is for me, but I just don't know if
If
it
it's
is for
not,
everyone.
stop listening right now and go watch it. I mean, you're not going to understand anything I say if you if you haven't watched this.
Oh man, that really dates us, Raj. Uh,
It's what 95, 94 somewhere or maybe 97, but it's yeah, movies. I mean, it's
that's
it's
hilarious.
it's a classic at this point.
It is a classic, yeah. So, developmental editor in 2020, that was 3 years ago, like, at the time of this recording, like, what's happened since? So we got
Yeah,
into some beta readers, it sounds like, and, I mean, I guess it's just a question of, like I know this is hard, but it's been a long time.
Yeah, yeah. And that does help too, to be honest, because I would say I finished the book in 2021 after I took all of Sheila's edits and I was in Salt Lake City. It was just a serendipitous thing. I was in Salt Lake City when I finished the last edit. I took my family out to Indian food to celebrate, and I
Mm.
even like printed it off at a FedEx Kinko's in Salt Lake City. Spent like $85 on printing and put them in my suitcase, made my suitcase super heavy on the way home, and even posed in front of the mountains with my manuscript. And I was like, okay, I'm done.
Mm.
And then one of the beta readers that I had reached out to, but was in the middle of a move and hadn't had time to read it, got back to me, and he was like, "Hey, I feel like there's one too many characters in the book.
Mm.
There's quite a few characters, and so maybe think about combining and or eliminating a character." And as we've talked about, the book is about grief. I could not kill any more characters. I think the readers would revolt. So I was like, okay, can't do that.
Mm.
And then I realized that yeah, he was absolutely right. Thanks,
Mm.
Peter. There were two characters that were both more or less in the same profession, same gender, both close to the family. It made so much sense to combine them to give each of them more screen time, quote unquote, page time, and it actually ratcheted up the drama a little bit. So even though I thought I was done in 21, I actually finished January 22,
Mm.
making that change. A
Mm.
lot of find and replace, which I hope does not go bad on me. I'm working with a copy editor now to make sure that we smoothed out all those. But it was really interesting because I actually had to add some material to the book to explain now that, you know, this character is also this other character, then,
Mhm.
it's essentially like one person's best friend, another person's love interest, and there were two people to start with, but now it's one person. It's like, oh, well, that adds drama when,
Yeah.
the love interest is the other person's best friend.
Yeah.
And so
Interesting.
so all that to say, finished January 2022. And then all along, I've been querying agents to try to get the book traditionally published. And that process is a disaster. It is antiquated as all get out. I understand all the reasons for why it is the way it is, and I can't necessarily think of a better system, but it's still a bad system.
Yeah. Yeah. And so after querying, I mean, what I know about the publishing world,
Yeah,
let's talk about the system because I think it will be helpful to give context into, your decision to go the direction you have gone with it. There's gatekeeper. I put it similar to like trying to get into like a to Harvard, some Ivy League school of like it's like the 1% of the 1%, and you have to have all these other things that are and unfair advantages in order to get it, to the point at which like, and this is where it maybe is not similar to, I don't know anything about elite colleges, but to the point at which if you actually could get published, you have to have all the things that would render being published by a publishing house like not actually helpful at this moment. Meaning like you have a platform, you have a following, you could sell lots of copies, all of these things. That's my impression of publishing, and that's also very biased towards nonfiction publishing. I don't know exactly what happens in the fiction world, but yeah, is that a accurate read on the publishing world from your vantage point?
it's close. I think that I was trying to think of a better analogy. I mean, obviously, there's other industries like music that are similarly run, or at least have been.
Yeah.
But no, I think probably even taking it up a level of thinking about trying to get from essentially high school sports to the professional leagues is probably a more apt analogy because
Yeah.
in publishing, or in fiction at least, you have to write the book. So very similar to being an athlete in high school, I would say. You have to write the book, and then that has to be good enough. You have to apply to all these, agents. So I think the agents would kind of be like the college level. You have to
Mhm.
excel there. So trying to think of going from a high school athlete to being an elite college athlete, full scholarship, that's a huge hurdle there that most kids don't make. And
Yeah.
then to go from there, have an elite career there, to get an agent and get drafted or signed,
Hmm.
that's like the number of levels you're going. So in
Yeah.
publishing, it's you write your book. In fiction, nonfiction books, you write a proposal and then you write the book after you get signed. But you write the book, you submit it to agents. That does feel a lot like a college application process. Then the agent works with you, tells you the things that are wrong with your book, and then you go fix it. So that process could take a year, maybe more. And then they try to go sell it. And by the way, they may be right or wrong. Like if people had a formula for making hit books, they do it.
Yes.
Like there
Yes.
wouldn't be any not hit books. But
Uh-huh.
people invest millions in books that don't go anywhere.
Yeah.
And so your agent may or may not be right. They may or may not be passionate about your project enough to get it to the next level. They might be waiting for the next, John Grisham, and you are not. And so you might just be kind of filling a hole in their schedule while John's, off doing whatever and trying to get to the next book. And then they take that book after they think it's finished to auction to sell to publishers. And if you can get a publisher to buy it, they will have an editor come in and rework the book again. So you probably have rewritten your book, 3 to 4 times after you thought it was done in order to appeal, quote unquote, to the market. And and then it will hit shelves.
Mm.
And if you're not one of the like elite tier authors like Stephen King, Patterson, those guys, you're not likely to get a ton of support from
Yeah.
the publisher, and you have almost zero control. You don't get to pick your own cover design. If they tell you to make edits, you don't have a lot of pushback in being able to do those things, including adding, deleting characters, all those kinds of things. And some of it's really culturally driven, and
Mm.
some of it is of the moment. Some of it's like timing too. That my book deals heavily with grief, and if there happens to be a national tragedy that happens around the time of the release of your book that you've been working on for 2 years, tough.
Yeah.
I don't know if they pull releases or not, or if they reschedule them or
Mm.
whatever. But the point is that you're very much at the mercy of a lot of factors
Yes.
to
Yes.
even let your book see the light of day, if it happens
Yeah.
well at all.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, so you tried to play that game. You worked on that for a while, and that's not where you've landed. So what's the plan? Where how are we moving this thing forward?
Yeah, there's a great writing coach named Ali Fallon who tweeted one day that the book industry is like the music industry. It's just that the book industry doesn't know it yet. And if you think about the way the music industry is now, last night I was listening to a band called Scary Pockets with my kids, and Scary Pockets is a kind of spin-off of the band Pomplamoose, which really it was just a YouTube-based band. They did this thing called video music where the kind of shtick of the whole thing was every instrument, every sound that you hear on their song, they've somehow captured on video. And
Mhm.
and which for those of us who grew up with MTV doesn't sound like all that, like of a big deal, but it was original, and obviously they're very talented. Jack Conte, who is part of that, both of those groups, he started Patreon and is really supportive of artists. And anyway, so it's like this is the way that the music industry is going. It's being very disrupted by all of these platforms that we have to showcase our work, and then if people like it, then it blows up. And the funny thing is, like, now record labels take notice of people who make it for themselves.
Mm.
And the book industry has been very, very resistant to that. They say that they won't publish anything that's been previously self-published.
Mm.
That's true unless you write the next 50 Shades of Grey, and then they go, well, we'll make an exception just this time.
Yes.
And
Yes.
and which is again very similar to probably what the music industry's stance was. Like indie, you were kind of thumbing your nose at the industry, all that, until you were interesting enough sales wise for them to go, okay, we'll forgive your sin of going independent, and we'll support you now.
Mm.
And so that for me was a lot of it. I also, I've talked before about how I came up in the nonprofit world, in the church world, and had 7 jobs in 10 years, didn't understand a lot of the politics that happen in that system. And And then I went out to work on my own as a creative professional and found so much freedom in doing that. And
Mm.
then as soon as I write my own passion project, then I start to try to get back into an exclusive system there where the rules are really archaic. I was just like, this sucks. I don't want to do this anymore.
Yes.
And
Look at here, Raj.
well, also too, I mean, I want to say like it's pretty dehumanizing the way that these things are dealt with. And again, I understand why they get so many submissions,
Yeah.
but it's common for them to say it's going to take you 6 to 8 months to even hear back if you've been accepted or rejected by the agent.
Yep.
There's obviously politics. Like there's this cliche of them saying that you don't need to have a job in publishing to get published. And it's like, well, why would that even be a cliche? Like, why would you? It's sort of like, why would you even bring up that there's no snakes in my car?
Yeah.
It's like, what do you mean?
The very fact that you say that
It makes me
you're showing
worry.
your hand. Yes.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so it's like, I mean, 6 to 8 months to even get an email reply. And even then it's a form reply. There's no way of you don't typically get personalized feedback of like, oh, the topic's too heavy or the humor or whatever. Like you don't get any of that. So you can't change anything. You can't improve in the
Yep.
process. It's just spaghetti against the wall to see if something sticks over and over
Yes.
again. And
Yes.
I have a job and a family, and I can't devote full time living in a cabin just spamming,
Yeah.
agents to try to get work out in the world that I think will legitimately help people.
Yes. Yes. Uh, and so that's not how we're doing it. How are we doing it? What's the
Yeah.
alternative path?
So self-publishing, and I got this advice a lot, well, I don't even know if I would call it advice, but this comment a lot when I talked about trying to go the traditional route, and people are like, well, have you considered self-publishing? It's sort of like, yeah, it's like when your doctor's like, well, have you considered diet and exercise? And it's like, yeah, I mean, it's yes, uh, but I hadn't really seriously considered it until I saw Allie's tweet about the publishing industry, and it's like somebody who'd
Yeah.
been traditionally published saying that this is the new viable path really lent a lot of credence to it. And once I decided to go this route, I started realizing what a natural fit it was for my skill set. Where it's like one of the big things that publishing houses do for you is they provide marketing and distribution. Distribution is still a challenge, although you have Amazon, the largest book retailer in the world, where you can just directly publish to. And then marketing is what I do for a living. And
Yeah.
so I was like, okay, well, if those two problems are solved, then why wait for the gatekeepers to give me
That's right.
permission to do this?
That's right.
So we're self-publishing.
Yeah. I love it. I love it. Well, I know there's a lot that's TBD about the launch process that we're working on and developing. At minimum, we're hoping that people will sign up to pre-order and on launch day get their copy and leave a review. Reviews are a huge part of what makes a launch effort continue to grow and not just be a flash in the pan. And so tell us, just as we know at this moment, what can people do to be a part of this, and yeah, and what does the path forward look like?
Yeah. So the nice thing about getting bringing this back under my own control and deciding how this was going to go out in the world is that it then made me think about how do I want to launch this book? When do I want to launch this book? I will be turning 40 in March of next year, and as anyone properly having a midlife crisis, I want to do something big for it. And so I have thought about it, and the two bucket list items that I would love to accomplish before my 40th birthday is to get this book out in the world. And then second would be I've always wanted, I don't know why exactly, but I've always wanted to write at least a $10,000 check to a charity. And this book is based on a real life counseling center and grief counseling center for children. And so to me it seemed like such a natural fit to say, okay, I don't actually need the money from this book, and I have never. That's never why I wrote the book, and most authors have side jobs, that aren't James Patterson or anybody who writes a book that becomes a movie. And most everybody else has a day job, and I do, and I'm really honored to get to work with the people that I do. So I don't actually need the royalties from this book, and so what I'm planning to do is every book that's ordered between now and my birthday at the end of March of 2024, I'm going to give all of the profit away, everything that Amazon or whatever platform does not take. I'm going to give it away to the sharing place, the place that the book is based on, and and I am just really, really hoping that people will join me in this effort to let's get to $10,000. Let's
Yes.
sell enough books. I think it's probably around 2,500 books that we're going to try to sell. I'm also going to, reach out to some folks. I spent about 10 years in nonprofit, and even though they were a little rocky, I've got a lot of good friends from those worlds, and so we're going to see if we can get some matching funds available to
I
help
love it.
just along this road to
Yeah.
making this book about more than me and my 40th birthday and all of that. But I mean, ultimately, even if you think I'm an idiot, like, and you don't, even if you're not that interested in reading the book, just knowing that, several dollars from each copy, again, everything that Amazon or the platforms don't take is going to
Mm,
go to the Sharing Place Grief Counseling
yeah.
Center for Children in Salt Lake City. 60% of the kids that are there about that have lost a dad, and
Mm,
they're working through this, ages 3 to 18, and their
mm,
families, they're just working through this grief. And so it's not about me. It's not about, my goals as an author or whatever. I'm a almost 40-year-old dad. I wear New Balance shoes. I drive a Hyundai. Like, this isn't my get rich plan. This is a book that I think will help parents and people who are kind of struggling with that question of how to get through life, that
mm,
have a sense of meaning, have a sense of purpose in their life, and then the proceeds all the way up until the book launches will go to the Sharing Place. And that's my plan. To
I
it's
love it.
it's not super sophisticated. I just think
Yeah.
that doing something good is going to attract the right people to partner on this. And bookending it with my birthday being kind of the cutoff date, it's kind of just convenient. It's just a way that we can say, hey, can we in the next 6 months here, can we all do this together? And I'm
Yeah.
counting on the power of relationships and the internet and everything to really care for these kids that are going through a hard time in Salt Lake, help this great organization do something amazing in the world, and I will be honored to just be a part of that.
I love that. I love that. Well, I'm here for it, and I want to ask everyone listening that if we can get the Meaning Movement community behind Raj in this effort, both to launch Raj your career as an author, going public as a writer. I know there's more books in the works. That this is just the first, and to give you a solid start would be really really meaningful, and also to support just an amazing organization. So, how can people sign up to be a part of the launch?
Yeah, I'm hoping that we'll have pre-order links available by the time of launch of this episode. But if even if we don't, either way, if you go to rajlula.com, rajlulla.com, and you add your email address to the list, then that will be the very first place that we'll put the link out. Also, very interested in anybody again who wants to help with matching donations. I've got a nonprofit lined up, so those matching donations will also be tax deductible. I'll be releasing information about that as soon as well. And yeah, I mean, let's just raise a lot of money for these kids and these wonderful humans who I've gotten to talk to who spend their whole lives helping kids through grief. And what could possibly be more meaningful and important than that. So yeah,
I love it.
rajlula.com, and sign up for the email list or hit the pre-order links if they're up by then. And
Yes, yes.
would just be so honored if you go on this journey with us.
Yeah, and if anyone listening has a podcast, a newsletter, a network, a event, something, anything where that Raj can be a part of to spread the word about this book, reach out as well. So, Raj, I'm
Yeah.
pumped. I'm sure we're gonna have more conversations about this as we move forward. But thanks for coming on, and excited to watch you, yeah, take this next turn in your journey.
Yeah, well, thank you so much for the support and even just giving up your platform for a few minutes to be able to talk about this. This is the kind of thing that I want to see happen for the next 6 months is just people coming alongside each other for things that are bigger than ourselves. And the Meaning Movement is such a great place for that. And I thank you for that.
Thank you, Raj. Once again, thank you, listeners, for tuning in. You can find links to Raj's book in the description, wherever you listen to this podcast. Also, in our show notes at themeaningmovement.com. If you're not on the newsletter, get there. It's great. I'm sending out inspiration every other week or so, give or take. Here's what I'd like to invite you to. In supporting Raj, I'm so moved by this book, so moved by what he's doing with it, how much he's sharing with us about it. I wanted to invite the community to get behind him in an effort. If we could get 50 of his books pre-ordered, all the royalties of those pre-orders, again, go to the charity that inspired the book, then I would like to do a book club around the book. If we can reach that 50 mark, Raj said he'd also jump in and do some Q&A with us. All you have to do is order the book. You can find the pre-order link in the show notes and send your receipt to book@rajlula.com. That's how Raj tracks pre-orders. Mention the Meaning Movement there. And if we can get 50, then we will, you'll also get the ebook. I forgot to mention that. If you send that over, he'll send you the ebook as well. It's a way that we can support him, a way that we can be together, create a community moment around this book and with each other. I'm excited to talk with many of you live in those chats. So let's see if we can get there. Find his book. Tell your friends if you know people who like books. And we'll be back next week for more in this series. Can't wait to share more with you. Thanks so much for listening. See you next time.